hear your voice in the cool moonlight? Do you sing those words for me? To me they sound so empty. Why do you sound so sad as you tell me of the things you've seen and the home that you once had?
Hi everyone, it's Natalie. Welcome to Sunday, and I will be your sub-host for Witches of the Moon. This will be a second video that you will see today because this week we are doing the question and answer, and if you've been watching the videos all week, you know that each host and sub-host is doing a video on this. Now, since we did not get as many questions as we were hoping from viewers, many of you already know that we asked each other questions, and so today I'll be answering the questions from my fellow hosts on Witches of the Moon. And I decided that in order to do this video, I was going to answer the questions based on the host's day. So I'll start with Aaron and Lisa, and then do Bay and Jay, and then do Alex and Yvonne, and so on and so on. So as I received the questions, I wrote them down in a little notebook, and they're not in order of the day, so you'll have to bear with me as I flip through this. Aaron's question for me was, do I have a magical garden? And if yes, what grows within it? And if not, what would I have grow within it? And the answer to that would be, no, I do not have a magical garden or an herb garden. I would love to have one, but my time for gardening is so limited. I actually considered getting the chia herb garden just to have some fresh herbs growing somewhere in the house that I didn't have to do a lot of tending on. Now, I did go recently to the dollar store, and I found packages of seeds for 25 cents, and I picked up sage and thyme, and I also picked up some echinacea seeds. I was actually trying to order the herb echinacea, and I got the seeds instead by accident on Amazon, but I thought, what the heck, I'll try to grow them because echinacea is a beautiful flower. It's purple, and that's my favorite color, and by my homeowners association's rules, I'm supposed to have flowering plants as well as shrubs growing in my front garden area, and I don't. So I thought, well, what the heck, I'll give it a try and try to grow some. I did have some mint. I had a chocolate mint plant, and it actually tastes like chocolate mint, growing in my front yard, and then we got a really bad cold snap at the end of last fall, and it just wiped it out, unfortunately. If I could have a garden, I would obviously have sage and thyme. Echinacea would be an excellent herb. I'd love to have lavender and rosemary growing, and mint. I think those are the basic herbs. Obviously, you can't grow some of the more, taboo herbs like henbane and that kind of thing. So even though some recipes call for those, it's obviously hard to get a hold of them, and although it'd be kind of nice to have some growing in the garden, I don't think it's ever going to happen. But that would be what I would have growing in my garden. So essentially sage, thyme, echinacea, mint, rosemary, and lavender. Alright, my next question came from Lisa, and she wanted to know, when did I start on my path? And for those of you that have watched my introduction video or my personal video on this topic, it's kind of actually a funny story because I originally started on this path when I was about 11 or 12 years old, but set it aside for a very long time due to the way I was raised. I was raised in a very staunch Christian household, and then I married a Catholic, and when you are young and you're told that this is the only way and the right way, and if you don't do this, you're going to go to hell, it instills a lot of fear in you when it comes to exploring your own spirituality and religiosity. And I found that I kind of set aside the witchcraft path because Christianity directly teaches against it. Now, as I've gotten older and I've done more research on Catholicism and the history of the Christian church, which for a long time Catholicism was the only Christian path. There were others, but they were kind of subdued by the Catholic Church, and by Catholic Church, I am including Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox, because those are all Catholic faiths. So they all fall under that umbrella. A lot of people don't understand that there is more than one sect of Catholicism, that Catholicism encapsulates more than just the Roman Catholic with the Pope and all of that. There are other branches that are recognized by the Roman Catholic Church as being Catholic churches. And then, of course, you have no, I can't think of what they're called now, so it doesn't matter. But due to that strong push, I kind of put aside my pagan path. And as I did more study, and I have tons of books on the Catholic Church and Christianity, and I'm very familiar with the Bible because it was drilled into my head chapter or verse from the Old Testament on as a young child. I started to realize, as I took a step back from what I was programmed to believe and looked at and said, gee, you know, a lot of these celebrations and beliefs that they do have their roots in paganism. And I started realizing that a lot of those Christian beliefs absorbed the pagan beliefs of the Celts and the other pagan groups that were around. And I started realizing that even in understanding that Mary, now, my mother held the mistaken belief that Catholics worship Mary as a deity, and no, they do not worship Mary. They will tell you very clearly, Mary is a creature. She's not a god or goddess. However, their reverence for her and being a vessel of the God or the living Word of God, as the Catholics understand Christ to be, is very, very close to having a goddess, because people do rely on Mary as a mother figure. They see her in the Catholic Church as our spiritual mother, and so it's kind of going back to the whole cult of Hecate thing, and I found that very interesting. So to make a very long story short, my path really began when I was about 10 or 11 and was set aside due to the beliefs of others around me, and the fact that I had very little control over my own life, my own path as a child. It was, you believed what my mother believed, and that was that. And I'm ashamed to say that, you know, when I was in the 20 years, first 20 years of my marriage, trying to be a good Catholic, for my family's sake, and because, you know, when you're programmed that Christianity is the only way, it's very hard to let go of that and be open-minded. And so I'm afraid that I was kind of that way with my children as well. Now they have to find their own path, and hopefully the damage that I did wouldn't be as profound as the damage that was done to me in terms of being able to understand and find my own spiritual path. But that's the long and short of it. It started when I was about 11, was set aside until just about a little over a year ago. Alright, so the next question that I was asked comes from Dan. Dan and Jay are the Tuesday hosts, and Bay Moon's question was, who or what is your oracle for all questions metaphysical? That is an excellent question, and I will tell you that I do try to communicate with my spirit guide. I don't know the name of my spirit guide. I do it in a very simple manner because I don't have a nice spirit board and all of that good stuff. So I have a little 3x5 index card that has yes, yes, and no, no written on it. And I have a pendulum that I created from a stone charm that I received from, in fact, I don't have my purse in here, or I'd show you, from an order that I placed with a metaphysical company, and it came as kind of like a little bonus. So I tied a kind of like a Christmas ribbon to it, and I use that, and that I carry it with me all the time. And so whenever I have an opportunity, I flip open my Llewellyn's journal. In fact, I have that with me here. I carry my date book with me, and inside the date book is, I don't know if you can see that, there you go, that's my index card. So I will use that to communicate with my spirit guide I try to do it on a daily basis, and I try to just talk with my spirit guide. I try not to just ask questions and seek information constantly. I try to communicate in other ways. Now, of course, because it's only a yes and no, it kind of limits the kind of communication that we can have, but basically I'll say, are you present with me today? Are you having a good day? You know, will you be open to communicating with me today? Those kinds of questions. And so, you know, I try to just talk with my spirit guide and tell them what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And, you know, then when I am in need of guidance, they don't, he or she or whoever it is, doesn't really feel like I'm just coming to them when I'm in need of something. Now, my other source for information is I have a set of OM fuse that I made from tongue depressors. Siobhan, can you open my box, and in the top is my OM sticks? Siobhan.
Yeah, I know, top shelf.
Yeah, can you please get that for me? Sorry, my daughter's in here with me today, so I'm going to try to show you the fuse that I use. These are ones that I created, and I actually did a video on these when I first made them, and I had some guy in Ireland that kind of corrected me on my terminology. They're in the box on the bottom, and they should be in the top. Like, open the top. And they should be in their bag in there. But I use these, and I'd like to show them to you because it was an idea that I got from DJ Conway's book, Celtic Magic, and she said just use flat sticks. And so the only flat sticks I had at hand at the time were tongue depressors that I was using to create little signs for, I work with special needs children, and not in there. Then look in the bottom, Siobhan, they're in a bag. You know what my sticks look like. They're there somewhere. Check in the bottom drawer. It may be down there. With my Ottoman. Anyway, I rely on those sometimes for more direct spiritual guidance. When I have something other than a yes-no question. No, that's incense, dear. That's why it says incense on the bag. These are my sticks that I made. Remember, I burnt the sticks. They've got the OM symbols on them.
Your wand is in here, your knife is in here,
yeah. Anyhow, I guess I won't be showing them to you since they seem to have disappeared out of their place in the box and nobody can find them. But I do use those when I have a more pressing question that's not just a yes or a no. Something that I'm questioning about, maybe my business or an issue with my family, things like that, and I'm wanting to get a more rounded perspective. I will use those. I don't own a tarot deck, and there's a story behind that too. If you watch the other videos, you'll know. So I don't rely on the tarot, and yeah, it's been so many years since I've used one, it would take me time to relearn the spreads. So that would be my choice, my own fuse.
Oh, I think I found them.
Oh, she thinks she found them. Hooray. Yes, those are them. Thank you. Okay, so, bae, here you go. These are my OM fuse that I created. These are what I rely on, and I'm sorry that the lighting in here is so bad, but these are what I use. And what I did was I burnt, since I'm learning them, I burnt the OM alphabet symbol here. I wrote the name of the tree in Pictish and in regular English, and then I put the meaning behind each one. And I did that for each one of these fuse. So here's my U. This one, I actually was going to put the meanings on the back, and then I realized, gee, if I'm doing a reading and I don't want to select. So these are all of them that I have. So this is my go-to source for gaining deeper spiritual information. And essentially how these work, if you're not familiar with them, is that you hold all of them in your hand and you ponder over your question. Okay, this one's backwards here, so then there's these. Oh, this one's upside down. Anyhow, you hold these in your hand and you kind of maneuver them around as you're working with them and as you're pondering over your your topic, and you kind of get your energy going, and you just kind of work them in your hands, and then you select 7 of them, and you think on your issue or your question or what have you for a little bit longer, and then you throw them out from you. And the distance as well as the placement kind of tells you what's going on. Obviously, the further out from you, the further out in time that kind of thing is bound to occur. So, from those 7 fews that you have chosen, and you're not supposed to look at them and choose them, you just randomly select and then you throw them out. That has been actually scarily accurate for me. So, anyhow, that's my choice. Okay, now for Jay's question. Jay's question was, when someone asks your advice on becoming a witch, what is the first thing you would tell them and why? And I had to really think about that because I have not really had anybody ask me yet. Since I'm fairly new to this path in a formal manner, I would have to tell people that I would meditate. I would begin meditation, and if you don't meditate, start meditating. Because that is, for me, the best way to get in contact with your higher self and with those that are in the astral plane to help guide you in your path on being a witch. Because being a witch is so very personal, and that's one of the things that I love about it, is that I really feel that my relationship to the god and goddess is far more personal than any canned religion you can find out there. I now feel that I have a direct connection to my deity without having to go through someone else or through someone else's rules to establish that connection. And I know a lot of my Christian friends say that they have a personal relationship with God and that they talk with Him, and I'm glad that they feel that way. But I know that, at least from the Catholic view, you have to go through your priest to gain absolution from your sins. So, and it was the same way in the Church of Christ. You had to go before your fellow Christians in the church and confess your sins and tell them what you did, and it was broadcast to everybody in the church, and they would pray for you and lay on the hands and all that good stuff. And you're always slightly removed from understanding that deity is everywhere around you. It's in everything that is created. It's in the rocks, the trees. It's within you, through you, and is you. And I feel that meditation is the best way to get into that frame of mind and to gain that connection. And so when you are beginning on your path, meditating would be the first thing I would recommend to anybody. Once you start meditating, then I would recommend doing some reading and some learning. Maybe do a year in a day study. I'm not Wiccan, so I don't necessarily feel that you have to do a year in a day. I personally feel that I've gained a lot from the Year in a Day group on Facebook, and I've talked about that, because you're gaining other perspectives, and I think we learn from other people's perspectives and from their personal religious experiences, and I think that helps to make our own religious experiences more profound. Not that I feel anybody should adopt somebody else's religious views, because one of the things about being a witch is that it is such a personal path, that it's you connecting with your deity directly through. And I do believe that there is a God, there is a goddess. Now, we know that God and goddess in many different aspects under many different names, and different aspects will call to you at different times, and you may know the God and goddess as different names at different times, and that's okay. And that's one of the things that I think people struggle with, that don't understand. So meditating is a really good way to free your mind and open that up. So that would be my answer to Jay's question. Now, going into Wednesday. Wednesday would be Alex and Yvonne, and I got Yvonne's question first, so I'll answer her question first. And her question was, have I ever had a spell backfire? And if so, what happened? And I have to say, I don't feel I've ever had a spell backfire per se. I have had spell work that I don't feel has been successful as it should have been. And what I mean by that is, there may have been some times where I was kind of struggling with something personal and was trying to create a spell to help assist me to change things in a more positive manner. And perhaps I had an end goal in mind, and the god and goddess had a different end goal in mind. But either way, it got me through whatever was going on. So, although the end result was not what I had envisioned in my head, it had not worked out as I had planned the spell to work. I may have gotten through whatever situation was going on. So I can't say necessarily that it backfired, but not turning out quite the way I planned, definitely. And one example of that was I had I have some issues with my husband. He's kind of hot and cold and bipolar about my religion. He's not very happy about my choosing this path because, you know, he was raised Catholic, and I don't care what he says. He still holds a lot of that deep core belief, being raised as a cradle Catholic. To him, witchcraft is evil, and you're asking for trouble. And then when he's watching shows like Most Haunted, and their assumption is that this horrible experience with this demonic entity was because this person was worshiping ISIS or practicing Wicca in their household. You know, and he's looking at that and he's going, see, you're going to bring something bad into the house, and da da da. That to me just shows the real ignorance of what's going on. So I was trying to use a spell to not say directly change, because we're obviously not supposed to impose on someone else's free will, but to perhaps allow his mind to be more open to asking questions and truly gaining an understanding of my path before making judgment on it that is negative and preventing me from doing it. Because when I was striving to be a good Catholic Christian girl, and in my mother's opinion, good Catholics are not Christians. But, you know, it was a faith that I felt called to at the time, and I realize now that it's because it was much closer to paganism than what I had been raised with, which was more puritanical and Calvinist in nature. And I felt it was more of a stepping stone for me to coming back to the pagan path of my roots, the druidic path of my roots and ancestors. So, you know, using I can't say that the spell backfired, but he has been going through periods of being more open and allowing me to discuss our views in the history and how the pagan path for me has really opened up my relationship to deity and my understanding and appreciation of myself as a creature of deity and so forth in ways that Christianity never did. So I can't say that the spell backfired, but it hasn't worked out quite as I had planned. I thought things were just going to be open up and, you know, would be great. So backfire, not exactly. Not work out as planned, yes. So that, Yvonne, I hope answers your question. Now, Alex's question was, how long have I gone without performing magic? And I actually think that's a very insightful question. Alex, you're so young, and yet you ask such good questions. For me, you know, it's funny because it depends on what you define as magic. If you feel that magic is only performed in a ritualistic setting, I go weeks without performing it. If you are like me and you hold the belief that magic does not necessarily have to be in a consecrated circle with your atame, that you can perform magic by simply reciting a small spell and sending that out into the universe, I do it almost on a daily basis. I find that I tend to say my spell work in my head as a little poem. I wrote a lot of poetry when I was younger. I still write poetry now. And so I tend to come up with little rhymes that are from my heart, that are wishes to the universe of things that I'm asking for, that I'm asking the god and goddess to grant me. And I will always incorporate a statement of, harming none, so mote it be. So I send that out. So in that sense, I can, if you look at it from a ritualistic perspective, Alex, I can go weeks without performing a formal magical ritual, because I tend to keep my formal ritual to the sabbats. Simply because I don't have a permanent altar space, and to sit there and yank out my big altar table and, set it up and get all the candles and the incense and all of that takes time. And now I will, excuse me, I will sometimes just go into my kitchen. If it's a spell that I want to formalize a little more, I'll cast a circle. I'll set up a little area with the elemental candles and the incense and my cauldron, and I will do a spell that way if I'm wanting something that's a little stronger. But if I do magic daily by just sending out certain things. So I hope that answers your question, and I really did think that was an excellent question, because it depends on your perspective. Moving into Thursday. Sorry, that was Thursday. Oh, you know what? I skipped Wednesday. I skipped Blythe and Nimbus. Sorry. So that was Thursday's questions. Wednesday's questions would be Blythe's spirit. And her question was, what made you want to start a YouTube channel, and has it helped or hindered my spiritual growth? And I have to say, I never even considered having a YouTube channel until I began watching the Witches of the Moon videos. My cousin, Sunshine Morning Ray, was the one who said, hey, you should check out our channel. And I just learned so much from the varying perspectives and different perspectives, and gained so much personal spiritual growth from watching all of the fantabulous witches on the Witches of the Moon, that I decided that I wanted to give back some of what I was gaining and learning by sharing my personal growth experience on this path. Because I know for me, having those videos, in addition to reading the books and doing the practices myself, really helped me. And I'm the kind of person that I value other people's opinions and perspectives. I don't necessarily agree with them. I don't necessarily adopt them. But I don't necessarily think either that opposing perspectives are bad. I love debate. I think healthy debate is healthy. I think debate and having different opinions and being able to express those opinions in an adult-like discussion manner is extraordinarily growth-bearing for both sides. You may not be persuaded to believe what the other person believes. They may not be trying to persuade you. They may be just trying to express why they think what they think. And that's why I get into a lot of political discussions on my Facebook page, and some of them have been very heated, and I've been surprised. I tend to be a little conservative fiscally. Socially, I consider myself more libertarian, and fiscally, I'm very conservative. I don't like the government taking my money and telling me how I should spend my money. I do believe we are here to help one another, and that it's our duty to help our fellow human beings who are in need. The stronger need to help the weak. That is how we strengthen ourselves as a whole. That being said, I've gotten into some really heated discussions with some of my more liberal friends, and you know what? I love it, because sometimes they make some really good points that I need to concede, and I think sometimes I make some good points that they also concede. And it's through that we both grow. So having a YouTube channel, I think, has really helped me grow spiritually, because I feel I'm giving back to the community by maybe helping another younger witch or someone who is on a pagan path, maybe not necessarily practicing the craft, but somebody who wants to know more about other people's personal spiritual journeys and gain some knowledge or wisdom or insight that they may have lacked otherwise. So that was really my inspiration. I wanted to give back what I felt I was gaining from Witches of the Moon and from just general interaction with other people on this path. And I really do feel that it's helped my spiritual growth, because it also gives me an opportunity to think aloud, so to speak, to absorb the readings that I'm doing, both on the Year in a Day program and personal books that I'm reading. I'm an absolute total bookworm. I hope that print books never ever die, because I can't absorb electronically processed books as easily as I can having the book in my hand, and the whole experience of holding the book in your hand and smelling it and what have you. And so I like being able to have the YouTube channel as an opportunity to process all of that information and give my perspective and hopefully help another young witch on their path. So I hope, Blythe, that answers your question. Nimbus's question was an interesting one. What person was most influential to you when you started on your current witchy path, and who is influential now? And I think in my last response I kind of answered that a little bit. I think the most important person has been Sunshine Morning Ray, because she was the first person that I feel I could openly discuss my path with, who answered all of my silly questions and didn't mind my seeking information and didn't mind guiding me to where I could gain more personal information myself. She was one of the first persons to tell me, hey, if you'd really like to understand some more, I recommend you pick up Raymond Buckland's book. And I did, and I had the entire book read and all of the activities done within 3 weeks' time. And I know that seems really fast, and how can you put a lot of effort into it? But I was doing it religiously daily, and I really did gain a lot of very good knowledge. And so from there I went on and through watching the Witches of the Moon videos last season, and I'm so honored to be a part of it this time around. I cannot even tell you. But, listening to they had one week where they talked about their favorite metaphysical books and which ones did they feel they had gained from, and I picked up a few of those that I found in the Half Price Books, which is my best source, because Amazon can sometimes be a little pricey, especially when you tack on to shipping, and a lot of times you can find those books at the Half Price Books over in their metaphysical section for a couple of bucks. So it's really fantastic. They had the Magician's Tables Books of Correspondence for $2 on clearance. So that was an excellent find. So, really going through each one of those books and learning more about the path of Druidry, which is really where my heart lies, and understanding that, I feel she has been the single most important in starting my foot on the path. Now, who is influential to me now? There are so many people I feel have been influential to me now that it's hard to name them all. So I will say this. Each and every witch that I come in contact with through YouTube, through Facebook, any of the Facebook groups, I'm in several of the pagan groups, the Denton pagans that I meet with periodically, I don't meet with them very often, but when I do, I find that the discussion there is stimulating and interesting. And also the big witches that I meet through your readings and writings. Christian Day, who is a very big proponent in the witchy community. I had the pleasure of getting to know him through Facebook, and he owns a shop in Salem. He runs the Dumb Supper that they do at Samhain in Salem. He has a shop in New Orleans where he recently moved to, called Hex New Orleans, and I find that I gain a lot of interesting perspective by discussing things with him. Watching some of the videos from Scott Cunningham and Raven Gramassi have been very influential to me. So I would have to say each and every individual that I come into contact with now is an important influence on my path, because you gain knowledge from other people, whether it's something you agree with or not, and that has an impact on your path. So that would be all of you as well. I felt that was a really good question too. Now, since I skipped Wednesday, did Thursday, went back to Wednesday, now I'm going to move on to Poe and Poe and Amy's questions, because there are Friday hostesses. Poe's question was, do you have any tricks for getting grounded and centered before, during, and after ritual? This is interesting, because when I first started doing ritual, I kind of had to set up a makeshift altar. I didn't have the altar table that I have now. And I have to tell you that preparing the altar table I have now and preparing my altar before took time. I don't have a permanent space, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. So I have to create my altar and then break it down. So when I'm getting ready to do a Sabbat ritual, something that's really important to me, it is important to me that I am very grounded and centered. And so what I will do is I will bathe, because I want to be clean completely inside and out, both metaphorically and physically. So I will use a ritual soap that I've created to gain some of the energies of those particular herbs. Usually I have rosemary and or dragon's blood incorporated in the soap somewhere, and so I'm gaining those protective qualities as well as the meditative qualities. I will try to meditate before engaging in ritual, because I want to open that third eye and engage with the deity and my spiritual guides, because I want them to guide me through this ritual. So I feel that that is really the best way. I also try to do ritual at a time of the day or on a day. It may not necessarily be on the actual day of the equinox or the Sabbat, but I may have to put off my ritual a day or two, because I don't like to do it when anybody else is in the house, or is going to be, opening the door. I usually do my ritual in the garage because of multiple reasons. One, I have a lot of room there. It's a little more private than in the house, and mostly because my garage floor is cement, and because I do put my elemental candles out in my circle, I don't want to run the risk of my carpet catching on fire. So I like the space, I like the privacy, and I like the concrete. So I will set up my ritual table there. And I do try to set up my ritual table first and have everything ready to go. Then I will bathe and meditate, and then I will go out and I will perform my ritual. And I find that because I'm a solitary, I don't participate with a coven. Getting grounded for me also means I need a period of isolation. I need to not be bothered by anyone so that I can focus my mind and my soul on what it is I'm celebrating and hoping to gain out of that ritual. So that's what I would do. I bathe, I meditate, and I look for isolation prior to performing the ritual. Alright, so let's see. Amy's question. How do you feel my journey is going so far? Boy, isn't that a loaded question. Because there are days when I think my path is going along pretty good, and I feel like I'm growing a lot spiritually, particularly after I've been viewing some videos or doing some, nice discussion with other witches. I feel that personal growth and there are times, particularly times of what I would call persecution by my spouse, where I feel like my journey is just tanking, like it did when I was trying to be Catholic. My husband was never really very supportive of that, too, because he never really believed in the Catholic Church himself. He believed it because he was raised that way. He followed the Mass and all of the holidays and beliefs because that's what he was raised to do, but in his heart, he didn't really believe it. He doesn't really believe in much of anything. He believes in God. I don't think he believes in a goddess, but he believes in God, and he feels that God created this earth and set it spinning and basically said, here you go, it's pre-programmed, run. What's the end result going to be? He's very Douglas Adams in his views. So what you have to understand about my husband is he's also one of those people that's not really open to other people's views. He likes to hear them, but then he wants to tell you why they're wrong. And so when you are engaged in a religion such as paganism and witchcraft, he really, and of course I have the whole nomer of witchcraft that goes with my religion, and being that he was programmed as a Catholic, he's kind of about that. So there are times when he is very hard on me about my religion, and he will dig and dig and put it down and put it down and put it down. He does the same thing with my Irish roots. He'll sit there and talk about how the Irish are nothing but a bunch of lazy, stupid drunks that are good for nothing, and they're stupid, and what do you expect? They're nothing but white trash. And he will say things like this. And to me, that's very damaging to my journey. I try to cast an invisible circle around myself when he's doing things like that to kind of allow it to bounce off and not affect me negatively. But I do feel that affects my journey in a negative manner because it, I won't say it makes me question my path, but it certainly makes it hard for me to explore my path openly. And I really don't want to be that kind of person. If you feel you are being called by deity in a certain manner and you are exploring a path that you feel personally helps you to grow as a person and as a human being and as a spiritual creature, you should explore that path unless it's harmful to other people. And I cannot seem to get my husband to be as open-minded about it as I am. Yet there are times when he's extraordinarily supportive. I mean, he will go and, buy me lovely things like this. Little gifts. He bought me a trunk at Yule to put all of my witchy things in. He gave me a cabinet. He cleared a cabinet out and took everything to the office so that I could store my things in a cabinet, partially because I think he didn't want them out in the open where people could walk in and see them, but also to give me some personal space to put my things in. So, I get very mixed messages. And when you're living with somebody who does not believe what you do or is against what you believe, I do feel that sometimes hinders your journey. So how's my journey going so far? That's a mixed question. It depends on the day. I think I am growing personally. I think I'm growing spiritually. I don't feel that I'm growing as strongly or as well as I could be if I could just be open and free with my religion. At least within my home. But I journey forward, and I'm a survivor, and I will grow regardless of who tries to cut me down. So I would say overall my journey is going well, but not as well as I would like. That's Friday's questions. Saturday's questions. We are down to Melody and Tequila. Tequila. Alright, Melody's question is, when dating or being in a relationship, how important is it to you that the other person has the same spiritual paths and beliefs as you do? Do you think us as witchy folk should tell the other person right away? Okay, now my perspective on this is probably a little bit different because I was already married for many, many years. Tomorrow is my 20th wedding anniversary. And so when I formally returned to the witchcraft path, I was already married for several years and had been Catholic for almost 20 of those years. So, my experience with telling my husband that this is a path I wish to explore, as I mentioned just a minute ago, it's kind of funny how these two questions sort of meld into each other, is a little bit more harrowed. And again, because, my husband was raised Catholic, and Christians as a whole see witchcraft as evil. And here's the funny thing. When you are studying the original scriptures in Aramaic and Greek and Hebrew, the term witchcraft is actually a misinterpretation. If witchcraft was actually pharmakeia, which is pharmacology, which is medicinal. So it was one of those things where the Jewish priests and the Christians were trying to wrestle away control of medicines from the general populace and give it over to the priests. The priests were supposed to be your physicians, both spiritual and physical. And so when you look at the original Aramaic and Greek and Hebrew scripture, and you look at that, the original term, which is King James morphed into witchcraft in his interpretation, was actually pharmacology, medicine. And so it's interesting when you look at it like that, because that takes us back to our roots as witches, where we had the natural understanding of the medicinal plants, good and bad, which ones were poisonous as well as which ones were beneficial. And so it's very interesting when you look at it from that perspective. But it's very difficult nowadays because the Catholic Church has had 2,000 years, and the Christian faith as a whole has had 2,000 years to demonize witchcraft. And so now people just take that interpretation and go, oh, witches are evil, and how dare you. When you take a look at the traditions of the Ozarks and the Appalachians, which is where I just came back from, I was in the Ozarks, you still see remnants of that granny witchcraft, granny medicine. And if you think back to, and this is probably a horrible example, but the Beverly Hillbillies, Granny knew what to do when you were sick. She had a remedy for everything. That was considered witchcraft in the early Christian era. You were not supposed to do that. If you had an issue, you're supposed to go to your priest. So when you take that into consideration and you're considering telling your partner or your love interest that you are a witch, I would start with that as a discussion first. Wend your way into that discussion. I do think that relationships are very difficult, and marriage is extraordinarily difficult. But your religion is also very important, and it is a part of who you are, and it's a part of how you live your life. So if you do not feel comfortable, at least, being able to practice and discuss your religion in a mature and honest manner with the person you are with, then that person is probably not the person you should be with. That being said, you do have to understand that witchcraft as a whole has a really bad rap. And so if you feel that you can have a frank and open discussion with this individual about your path and your religion, and make it very clear to this person that your religion is important to you and that it is not as it has been portrayed through Hollywood, through other religious lenses, you need to do that. And I think the sooner the better, frankly. I wouldn't go your first date and go, hey, I'm a witch, because, they're probably going to go, you're a nut, and they're going to walk off. I think that you need to, at some point, when you feel that the relationship is becoming serious, say, look, I'd like to have a frank discussion with you about religion. What are your views? Get their views first. Start out with saying, well, my views are this. I feel that there is deity in everything around us. And you start to explain the pagan perspective. Before you bring in any labels, I would avoid labels at the beginning. Get their feel for what your perspective is first, and then you can tell them, well, most people don't understand when I tell them about my religion because my religion is this. And now that you understand that this is my religion and that we believe you shouldn't harm anyone, including yourself, maybe you understand that, this is, what I believe in, this is what it's called. If they're more comfortable with the label of paganism, let them call them paganism. If they're comfortable with saying my partner is a witch, then you are a very lucky individual. I think that it is important. I think it's better overall for your relationship if you can find someone who is, if not on a similar spiritual path, open to you exploring your own spiritual path. And I've discussed my reasons for that in answering my last question. But I I don't necessarily feel they have to be on the same spiritual path as you, but you definitely want to find someone who is open to allowing you to be the spiritual being that you are and should and are called to be. So I hope that answers your question, Melody, because that is a really important question. I don't necessarily think it's all that important that they're on the same path, but they certainly need to be open to your understanding of your path, because your religion is part of your life. You cannot, I don't think, separate religion and lifestyle. Your religion is part of how you live your life. It directly impacts how you live your life. And if your partner cannot understand that and understand that from the beginning of your relationship, then you need to terminate that relationship and move on. And that can sometimes be very difficult because you're dealing with an emotional bond. But that's my personal perspective, and I hope that that's helpful to some. Now, Tequila's question is, do I believe in multiple lives and why? And this is an interesting question because I was brought up to believe that when you died, you went to heaven or hell. There was a judgment. And yes, there's an afterworld, but it's either going to be eternal pleasure or eternal pain. Now, where this gets comical is that as a child and even into my adult life, thinking on heaven, I'm thinking, boring. I think I'd rather go to hell. At least it's interesting. And I know that sounds to a Christian like a really horrible thing to say, but an existence where you're for an eternity doing one thing and it's all happy, and after living a human existence, how the human existence is integral, and the human experience is a series of ups and downs, seeking balance. And you cannot appreciate the good without the bad. So when you have an eternity of good, or bad, it sounds very monotonous and boring either way you go. And I cannot believe that deity would create us to have this wonderfully rich experience of good and bad, seeking that balance and understanding that you cannot have the bitter without the sweet, and you can't appreciate the sweet without the bitter. To suddenly end that and have all bad or all bitter or all sweet, and expect that you are going to be a happy soul. So I would have to say that it makes more sense to me that you have a series of human experiences that allow your soul to evolve to a point to where maybe you are beyond the good and the bad, and your soul is elevated to whatever spiritual level we are supposed to achieve. In that sense, yes, multiple lives make much more sense to me, because you are having that series of experiences, both bad and good, in various different times in history, which impacts how you live your life, and in various, tragedies and celebrations and so forth. So that makes a lot more sense to me. Now, I have had people who have talked about having rich past life regression experiences, or they've had some sense of deja vu, and they feel that they've been connected to this person or that person before in their lives, and that we see the same people, souls in our lives for a long period of time. And I can't say that I've ever had a really strong experience like that. I've never had a past life regression hypnosis done. I don't necessarily know that I believe in it because my father was a hypnotist and studied hypnosis and did a paper on it. Now, he believes in hypnosis, but I do know from my studies and from my experience with my father that in order for hypnosis to be successful, you have to be susceptible to it. And some people are more susceptible to it than others. So I don't know that I'm necessarily all that susceptible to it. And I don't know that it would work for me. So I don't know how reliable a past life regression hypnosis session would be for me. Perhaps that's part of my problem. Maybe I'll never know because I'm not open-minded to it, and that's something that I need to grow and open up to. But I can say that I have met people that I seem to click with right away, or people that I seem to not click with, immediately for really no inexpressible reason. And that could be due to some past experience with that individual and our souls recognize each other. And that, I think, is entirely possible. It's just not ever been to where I've been like, oh, I must have known this person in a past life. At this point, I honestly am not sure. The idea of multiple lives and multiple experiences for spiritual growth seems to make the most sense to me. So in that regard, I would say yes, I do. But have I ever had a strong past life experience or sense of knowing of a past life? Not personally. So, Tequila, I hope that answers your question. And now for the final question, because I see the video is almost an hour long. My final question is the Sunday question, which comes from Trina, my cousin, Sunshine Morning Ray. And her question is, coming from a Christian upbringing and family, do you feel your new belief structure to be as restrictive as some believe Christianity to be? And where do I see myself in 20 years? Well, in 20 years, I'm going to be 60. That's a long time ahead for me, and I don't want to think about it. I hope that within 20 years, on a physical level, my children will be grown, healthy, and adapted adults with families or lives of their own that they find personally and spiritually satisfying. I hope that my business has grown to a point that I'm able to actually employ somebody else and take some of the pressure off me. And then I'll be done with this godforsaken PhD program. Got 3 classes, dissertation and comps left. And I hope that I can accomplish that within the next year or 2, so that in 20 years I will have established myself as a PhD individual with a little more credibility, which I hope will help my business grow. I'm hoping that having that additional education gives me an edge over other speech pathologists in terms of growing my business and being able to help others in various aspects beyond just communication and language. Growth-wise, spiritually, in 20 years, I hope that I have set my foot upon a very strong path and have a true, strong connection with the elementals and with the God and Goddess in a way that I was unable to gain any kind of relationship with God as a Christian. Bringing me back to my coming from a Christian household, I found Christianity to be open and free in some ways, and I really enjoyed being a Catholic in terms of it was the first time that I really felt a growing connection to deity. In the Church of Christ, I remember growing up, and I remember sitting in church services, and you would have, well, for one thing, the liturgy of the Church of Christ is very similar to the liturgy of a Mass. And by liturgy, I mean the method by which Christians celebrate their religious ritual, because it is a ritual. What they do every Sunday is a ritual. And I personally was drawn to the high ritual of the Catholic Church, the formal altar, the, ceremony of the gifts of communion, the idea of communion as a community activity, because even though it's celebrated much the same way in the Church of Christ, the idea of unity within the church is not as strong in the Church of Christ. Because if Brother Melvin doesn't believe what Brother Ed is saying about this scripture, if they don't agree on what this scripture means, then Brother Melvin's just going to go off over here and start his own Church of Christ and piss off Brother Ed over here. And that was one of the issues I really had growing up with the Church of Christ was, okay, you have all these rules, and it's very restrictive in how you live. Brother Ed White, for example, the White family believed that, well, for one thing, they didn't even wear wedding rings. They wore no jewelry of any kind. They, against their own personal discretion, allowed their boys to wear a watch. Their daughter Becky was never allowed to even trim the dead ends off of her hair, much less cut it in any way. She had to wear dresses all the time. The wife wore dresses from the neck to the floor. They had no TV in their home. They did have a radio for emergency purposes. They were not allowed to listen to music. It was on a news channel. Their parents read every book. Their parents read every book before they were allowed to read it. They were not allowed to watch television except on Sundays when we had church at my house, and we had a potluck and the TV was on, and there was no avoiding it. And they were glued to it glue. So despite all of these strict religious ideals, and we were going to go to hell for dancing and cutting our hair and all that, let me tell you a little something about the White family. I took a trip with the White family to Vian, Oklahoma for a church meeting. And it was just me, because I had met a girl at a church meeting in Sherman, Texas several years before, and she and I were riding back and forth as pen pals. And that year the church get together, that revival, happened to be in her hometown of Vian, Oklahoma. And so I headed up to Vian, Oklahoma to see my friend Leslie Trammell with the White family. And it came to light that the daughter was being raped by the father, we found out later, by her brother, which is what I thought at first. That's what came to light first, was she told me that her brother was molesting her. As it turns out, both brothers and the father were raping her, and regularly, and she had gotten pregnant a couple of times, and the mother had aborted the children with a needle and saline solution. Okay. And these were you're going to go to hell. When they sat in church there, staring straight ahead like this. They didn't move. And I used to call Mr. White Windbag White, a name which I got in trouble for, because his sermons alone were an hour long. I got nothing out of it. I got no sort of spiritual growth out of that at all. And I never really felt the presence of God. I know that the scriptures say that where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am also. I never felt it in the Church of Christ. I would look around and I would see a sea of white faces, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, they went out into the world and established churches all over, so why don't we have, Asians here? Why don't we have blacks here? Why don't we have, I felt a void in the Church of Christ, and I didn't like it, and it didn't make sense to me. So, moving into the Catholic Church, I have to say I saw more people from various backgrounds there that were worshiping together, and I got a true sense of worship in the Catholic Church I did not get. However, it is still very restrictive. You still have these rules about you can't do this, you can't do that, you got to go through a priest to have this. So in that sense, I do not feel that the pagan path is nearly as restrictive in a lot of ways that the Christian church is, regardless of whether you're Baptist, which my father was Baptist, my mother was Church of Christ, my great-grandfather was Catholic, I married a Catholic, tried to be a Catholic for 20 years. I don't feel that the pagan path is nearly as restrictive. I find that the pagan perspective embraces those aspects of humanity that Christianity tries to oppress, and by that I am discussing human sexuality in part. My year and a day video I just recorded for this week, we talked about the celebration of Beltane, which is a celebration of the sexual rights between consenting adults, and I find that paganism is a lot less restrictive path. Paganism is also a lot less restrictive path, and although we do have ritual, your ritual is personal to you. It's not dictated to you by one person who leads your ritual, which, like it or not, separates you from that ritual. Although the Catholic Church will tell you in their teachings that it is a mass celebration of this ritual, the only person who's really engaging in the ritual for the most part is the priest. You do have people who get up and read some liturgy. Sorry about that. That's my daughter trying to reach me. You do have people who get up and participate, but for the most part, it's limited as to who can lead the ritual. For example, women are not allowed to be priests. And for the Catholics and for people who believe a Catholic faith, I understand why they say that, and that's fine for them. I do not feel that if we are both creatures of the same deity, why would one be set above the other? And that was one of the big problems I had with the Catholic Church. Now, I believe that Christians have a right to believe what they want to believe. Catholics and the Catholic Church has a right to its religious beliefs. And it has a right to teach its religious beliefs. I have a right to teach my religious beliefs. I'm doing that through YouTube. I'm doing that through the groups that I'm in. I'm doing that through frank discussions that I have with my friends, both Christian and non-Christian. I don't feel you have a right to tell me I have to believe what you believe. And that's my problem with all of those books of the faith. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, they're all horribly restrictive, and they all control the power within one or two people or a group, such as men. And I feel that paganism is a much more balanced path. We understand that deity cannot be just male or just female. We are not created just male and just female. You must have the balance for life to continue. You must have male and female for life to continue. Like it or not, that's the way it is. And how can you have a deity that's solely male and have balance in the universe if that deity even created us male and female? It just blows my mind. It makes no sense. And I think that paganism is a much more open path to understanding that men and women may have different abilities, but we are complementary and equal within the eyes of the god and goddess. That one is not set above the other. And I think a lot of times in a pagan path, people tend to lead more towards the goddess, and we forget that the god is just as important as the goddess. You have a balance. And so in that regard, I think it's almost like a pushback against Christianity and those sorts of faiths. Damn it. Those sorts of faiths where, male is set above female. And I think in some ways a lot of people on the pagan path use paganism as a pushback to that, to try to put the female above the male. And I think personally it's very important that we understand that we cannot restrict our pagan path in that way either. To do so, you lose the importance of the balance that paganism seeks. You must understand that male and female, one is not above the other. Yes, our skills and abilities are different, but they're complementary. They lock together. And that it's that balance that keeps life going. Without that balance, you lose it one way or the other. And so in that regard, I think sometimes paganism becomes a little restrictive just because people are making such a pushback to the feminist view, and we forget to value the men. So I personally feel paganism is a path that is more balanced, but if we're not cautious, we tend to lean a little more towards that feministic side as a pushback to the male Christian side or the male Islamic or Judaism side, because I see those three religions as a triad. I don't think that they're really all that different, regardless of what each one of them says. So I hope that that answers your question as well, Sunshine, and I hope that this video wasn't too terribly long. I see it's a little over an hour, but even if it was a little long, I hope that you guys found some value in the questions that I answered, and I appreciate the opportunity to express these views and answer these questions. I hope you all have a blessed Ostara, and blessed be. Happy St. Patrick's Day!